Alrighty. Let's take a quick stop over in the main library. Oh, wait. I almost forgot to get myself in the picture. There we go. There I am. Alrighty. Ah, shoot, that's the one thing about OBS, regular OBS over Streamlabs is it never tells you how many people are watching. At least not. Not that one. View. Docs. Twitch stats. Here we go. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So we'll pop this right up in here. Alrighty. So it's Monday again, and it's time for yet another Deer and Projector Lights. So let's take a little hop and a skip over to the theater room. And the music seems a bit loud too, so let's turn it down just a tad. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem now. Alright, so I got to see a whole bunch of stuff this past week. And the big one that we got to talk about is, of course, James Bond. The last of the Craig Bond films is out, and I went to go see it, and it is definitely a finale. It goes all in on ending this era of Bond. It does not hold back, I don't think, at all. Like, I can't think of a single thing it held back on. The action goes goes balls to the wall. They set up what's to come from the franchise. They set up a new 007 in the form of Nomi, played by, I believe her name's Lashana Lynch. And she's fantastic. She has great repartee with Craig. And it ties into the whole idea of Bond being a more emotional character. With Craig. You know, going all the way back to Casino Royale, he never really got over the loss of Vesper Lynd. And this plays into that as he has a new love interest in the form of this woman, Madeline, who has ties to this villainous character who targets both MI6 and Spectre and the entire world at one point, played by Rami Malek. Yeah, the premise this time around is Bond it starts out with introducing Madeline and Bond's relationship, and then it cuts to the present where Bond has since retired, except while he's in retirement, he gets the whole, one last one, the thing that always happens when you retire in an action movie. Somebody always comes around and says, "You need you to come back out of retirement for one more thing." And this time around, it was Felix Leiter, played by Jeffrey Wright. And Felix is asking him to come to Cuba because there's something going down with Spectre. And then he gets that, and then it's while it turns down Leiter, that's when he meets Nomi, the new 007, who tells him, stay out of her way, don't come to Cuba. And he's like, you know what? Just because you said that, now I'm coming to Cuba. And that's where it's revealed that Spectre isn't the villain here, as they are targeted by this new character and I already forgot his name. I mean, I'm going to get into it, but Rami Malek is not a bad actor by any means, but his character here is not the most memorable. And his character's name is... Come on. Load for me, IMDb. Come on. Lucifer Safin. Sure. So yeah, Safine. And Safine he's a Bond villain, all right. He's got aspirations of, causing chaos and world destruction. And he is actually more soft-spoken. He's actually fairly quiet, but he's like, Malick tries to play him as this sort of soft-spoken, creepy villain, especially since they give him a backstory where his face has been horribly scarred. But ultimately he's the villain that Bond has to help try to take down, and that involves Madeline, the woman he had an affair with and was hoping to settle down with. Like the whole reason they go to Italy in order for Bond to finally let go of Vesper Lind, and when he tries to, the Spectre attacks him, and so this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's literally the opening scene it's like the second opening scene of the movie. And after that goes wrong, he distrusts Madeline. He thinks she was part of it, and so he abandons her. And then now she's back, and there's all kinds of there's the lingering romantic tensions that were there, and as well as the sort of hurt feelings between the two. And all that ties into Safine in a way that you can kind of tell from the beginning. You can kind of tell Safine's... It's not very well disguised, I'll say that much. But yeah, the plot is kind of bloated. Like, the runtime here is 2 hours and 45 minutes. This is almost a 3-hour Bond movie. And it does not hold back on... Like I said, they didn't want to hold back on anything. They give Bond moments with Felix Leiter. They give Bond moments with the new 007. Craig actually gets to do a semi-reunion with his Knives Out co-star, Ana de Armas. And she's great for her scene. It's Bond and Ernst Blofeld. Christoph Waltz returns. And yeah, it's a nice mix of the sillier, like Roger Moore era Bond, where it's gadgets and it's like one-liners and all kinds of things. There's little bits of that sprinkled throughout, so it's a really, really well done mesh between the seriousness of the Craig era films and the more lighthearted, fantastical nature of the franchise before Craig. And I think he manages to merge the two of them in a way that works without undermining the other. One undermining the other. The jokes and the gadgets don't undermine the seriousness, and the seriousness doesn't get ruined by, the little one-liners that pop in and the fanciful gadgets. But the big selling point is Craig as Bond, and he's gone on record as saying this isn't a character he particularly likes. And if you read the books, you see what he means. Bond is a piece of shit. The character of James Bond from the novels is a piece of shit, and he's not a very good person. I don't know what you make of his character, but he is a relic of a bygone era. And I think with Craig, they've managed to make him more modern and less of this piece of shit relic and more of an interesting character. Like, the whole arc of the Craig era films works in a way that a lot of Bond films never did. Like, you could watch all the Craig era films, all 5 of them, as a full-on storyline. As a singular storyline from Casino Royale all the way to here, and I think it might work. I'd have to actively, once this comes out on video and I'm not as swamped in a backlog, I'll have to go back through and watch all 5 in a row and see how it works as a single unit of a storyline. But Craig here does not shy away from the more emotional beats of the character. He feels the pain of betrayal from Madeline at the beginning, and he feels the tiredness and of being this older person and ready for retirement, only for him to be brought back, and because of what's going on. And that's the thing, is like MI6 is not a wholly good organization. M has some more shades of gray in his character now because of something he did in regards to Safine's plan. Safine is able to enact his plan because of something MI6 did, and so you get shades of gray in just how good of a person is M, and should should Bond be working with this organization since they're up to something. But so there's a lot of nuance, especially in the first half is where all of the great character writing and the nuance is. I just realized something. My chat window, I don't think you can read with the white text on the parchment background. I'll have to fix that. But I've completely lost my train of thought since I saw that. The other thing I wanted to say was the action here is some of the best that I've seen. And this is the Craig era Bond movies have prided themselves on their action. They've been like this more Jason Bourne take on the action, but it's all managed to work. And here it looks fantastic as Bond, as they utilize the whole shaky cam element, but it doesn't make me disoriented like a lot of it does, like it sometimes does. And I'm trying to find the right words for it. And yeah, what I'm getting at is how like what was I saying? The shaky cam is often paired with the quick cuts that lead to me feeling disoriented and seasick and like I can't tell what's happening and I'm not having fun. Here, there's shakiness to the camera, whether it's because they're using handheld, whether it's more it's not as steady, or whether it's because of added-in effects, like whether it's post-production or production causing it. I will say the action here makes use of longer shots, so that you're you're never really disoriented. You can always kind of tell. They let the shots play out, which is what you're supposed to do with action. Otherwise, you get really bad quick cuts that make that seem like they're cool, but you can't tell because you can't see a goddamn thing. Yeah, and then I do like Bond and Madeline's relationship as it plays out. I do think the two of them coming to terms with what had happened and overcoming each other's past issues is a really solid romance for Bond. And that's the thing, is like, people might say, oh god, this isn't Bond. Bond's supposed to be like laying pipe all the time. He's supposed to be going around banging chicks across the globe. But number one, Vesper Lynd, that's what the Craig era Bond has been, dealing with, is he's not just hooking up with girls all the time. It's this Bond is a lot more modern and more emotional than, just a horn dog. And number two, Bond has been married before. This has been a storyline that's been featured in the Bond series in the past, so it's not new ground either. I just like that they're willing to actually go there for this. And yeah, I think for the first big chunk of the movie, it's really good. And then there's some stumbling as it gets towards the end. The end is where it gets into the Doomsday plot, and it becomes a full Bond. It's the full Bond ending. With all of the trappings thereof and all the goofiness there is. And unfortunately, I don't see myself remembering this for the villain. I think the last great villain Bond had was Javier Bardem's character in Skyfall. Like, as much as I love Christoph Waltz as Blofeld, he doesn't really get to do much in his movies. And the only other villain I remember from Craig, the only villain I actively remember from the Craig Bond films is, despite not remembering his name, Javier Bardem's character in Skyfall. I feel like that character was more compelling than Rami Malek's character, Safin here. What was his name? Silva. So I think Javier Bardem Silva was a better written character than Rami Malek's Safin here. And sadly, we ended up not getting much of a performance out of him that's memorable. He's so soft-spoken, and while his dialogue is creepy and while he comes off as creepy, he is not wholly a memorable character. Like, I remember Christoph Waltz more as Blofeld than I do Malek as Safin, because number one, Waltz is basically just doing the charismatic villain character he's become known for as Blofeld. And two, Blofeld is given much more interesting stuff to say, and Waltz is able to play it up more. And Malek is sort of so reserved to the point of him being forgettable, honestly. And then when it gets to the finale, I honestly felt a little hollow. Like, I didn't feel the emotional weight of it, because I mainly felt like they were leaning so far into the emotion of the finale that they overplayed it, and then I ended up feeling kind of empty about it. Like, okay, moving along, get it going. We're almost done here. Come on, finish it up. And while it's not a bad premise for an ending, I do feel like they lean so heavily into it that it undercuts the emotional weight of it. And I feel like that they had held back, actually, and played it down, it would have tugged harder at the heartstrings. But that's just me. Suffice to say that No Time to Die is definitely one of the best of the year, and especially if you're a Bond fan. And I've been a fan of Bond, and I've seen him with my dad for decades now. Because especially since they would often come out right around his birthday. And I think it's a great action movie. It's a great send-off for Craig as Bond, and it leaves nice bookend to this era, so we can look toward what's to come, whether it be switching from Bond as just a name for a character to just the 007 franchise. And now we shift focus to Nomi as she becomes the focus, and then maybe split off into other 00 characters, so that you have a whole franchise of spies to follow. We'll have to wait and see what their plans are. But this is a nice bookend to the Craig era of Bond. Next up, the movie that's the other thing too, is that both No Time to Die and this next movie got delayed by COVID. Although one ended up in theaters raking in all the bucks, and the other got sent over to the Netflix. Pokémon, the 23rd movie. Now, I actually don't hate the rebooted movies. I do think the first one, the I Choose You movie, its biggest problem is that it's basically just a cliff notes of the first season of the anime, and then it's kind of held back by that, and so all the emotional beats are just beats from that first season of the anime. The second movie is not amazing, but I had a lot of fun with it. I liked the characters they introduced. I like the way they had people who weren't in the Pokemon world who weren't that into Pokemon. And then they discovered that they do like these Pokemon as they became friends with them. And that's the whole point, is that it's not about... That's the whole thing, is like, these fantastical creatures, you don't have to like them, but they're part of the world. And sometimes... And things are a little happier when everybody's there for each other. And I liked it. Meanwhile, here we've got Pokemon Tarzan. This plot and Pokemon's done basically Tarzan / Mowgli in the anime. I think they've done it at least once. There was the season in the Safari. There's the first season in the Safari Zone where they had a little Tarzan kid and being raised by Kangaskhan. And here you've got a kid who gets left behind in the jungle and raised by the current mythical Pokemon. The big one you gotta get at events, Zarude, which is a dark grass, I believe, monkey ape. And I can, every time I hear its name, I only think is, what song is this? That's all I can think of when I hear the name Zarude. But yeah, and that covers a lot of the beats from the Tarzan storyline. The idea of, are you human? Are you Pokemon? You were born human. You were raised as a Pokemon. What are you, though? Are you something in between? And Coco, the character, the Tarzan character, is, it has a lot of those emotional beats. Like, he's not quite sure because he can't do Pokemon moves like his dad, Zarude, and yet he's able to keep up with him. He's able to, commiserate with and communicate with the other Pokemon. He is this interesting blend of human and Pokemon, and he's able to bridge the gaps between those worlds in a way that, yet a lot of humans rarely can do, or Pokemon can do. And so his whole story arc is very, very touching. I think it manages to use those same emotions. I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of cheating in that it's borrowing the emotional beats of Tarzan, but specifically like a Disney Tarzan, not like the traditional Tarzan of the Burroughs age, but the Disney Tarzan. But it does use those beats to its benefit, and as well as tackling beats of selfishness, like the Zarude are Pokemon that do as they please, and they cause disharmony in the jungle because they don't think of the other Pokemon. And so it's up to Coco to kind of help everybody get along. And so he utilizes those themes well. The one thing I will say is that the villain is the weakest part. I kind of liked that there wasn't a real villain, so to speak, in the last movie. It was just a natural disaster that everybody had to help combat. And here they try to throw in a villainous character in the last act, and it does not work. His motivations don't make any sense, and he's just kind of evil for evil's sake. He's kind of like a weird evil version of Giovanni Ribisi's character from Avatar. And I got major Avatar vibes in this too, because that's the thing, is like, they get to a point in the jungle where there's this big hanging tree with, one of those big trees with the big hanging vines that you'll see, and I believe it's South Asia. But the character is just like, I gotta get there, and because, for science, but it doesn't make any sense because he's doing it in spite of the Pokemon, and he goes crazy because he can't do his science, because people are like, but Pokemon exist, and there's no point in doing the science if it threatens those Pokemon. And he's like, but no, the science! Nobody understands! I gotta do the science! And it's not even that explained, it's just, they don't understand my vision! What vision? My vision! Okay then, Tater explained, you're my vision! And yeah, it's a really weak way to try and build it to a climax. And speaking of Avatar, there's a big giant mech that they have to fight, and that definitely gave me Avatar vibes again. Weird that they're taking from Avatar of all things, because I thought beyond the people who got caught feelings for the Na'vi, I didn't think anybody remembered Avatar after 5 years. But yeah, Secret of the Jungle is a nice cute, fun Pokemon movie. I think it's one of the better ones, and it's definitely the best of this current reboot series that they're doing, where it's Ash just off on his own adventures, running into new characters, and I like it here, and I like this movie. I like this the most out of the three so far, and we'll see if the other how the future movies fare. But yeah, funny enough, the third movie in both the original movie series and the reboot series are my favorites. A fun little synchronicity there. Speaking of things that came to streaming, we've got a new thing coming to Disney Plus, and that is a crossover you didn't know you wanted. Muppets Haunted Mansion. We haven't been getting a lot of Muppets love from Disney, sadly. They tried to do an ABC series that was basically The Office. They did a couple of movies, and they've done some specials. And they tried a new Disney Plus series that I enjoyed, but we haven't seen anything new from, sadly. And now we've got something more akin to what we saw from them when they first picked up the Muppets, i.e., the crossovers with pre-existing properties. And I think they're finding their groove again. The story here is basically Gonzo and Pepe have to stay the night in a haunted mansion because Gonzo wants to prove himself, this great daredevil sort of character. So he spends the night in the most haunted mansion where even his great hero, the magician, MacGuffin the magician, couldn't last and supposedly disappeared from. And so Gonzo wants to prove himself while Kermit and the others are having a Halloween party. And while he's in this mansion, he sees variations on the Muppet on his friends, the other Muppets, as well as celebrity guest stars. Featuring the likes of Darren Criss from Glee, Taraji P. Henson, Pat Sajak shows up at one point, Sashir Zameda is a cameo, Will Arnett is the sort of like host of sorts, the one that meets Gonzo at the door and shows him around the house, and you've got, like I mentioned, Taraji P. Henson is the bride. The bride who wants to marry Pepe and keep him there forever. And it's a great, spooky little Halloween story. You've got Gonzo freaking out, getting great effects too on both on the puppets as well. Like there's a shot where John Stamos gets a puppet face. And I think it's probably just a simple transition, but I whatever they did to give John Stamos this monstrous puppet face was a fantastic shot. I had to rewind it and be like, what just happened? What just happened? My eyes, I don't, what? And then you've also got the various blacklight effects, and the various ways of making the puppets look spooky and ghost-like. And then there's a point where Gonzo actually looks old, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing to look at. Plus, song numbers. And it's fun. It's a fun, spooky little Halloween story. And I liked it. And I think this is much more in line. This feels like something we would have gotten from the era of Muppet Treasure Island, Muppet Christmas Carol, that whole late 90s era of the Muppets. And I feel like if we got more of these, like not necessarily Muppets Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, but like Muppet Star Wars, Muppet Marvel, since those are the big hot Disney properties, Muppet Disney recreations where the Muppets reenact various Disney movies as like a tribute to like however many years. Let's see. 1937 is when Snow White came out. So you could either do that or 1928 when Steamboat Willie came out and do the Muppets, like a review, REVUE style show of the Disney movies. And that could be something for the end of the decade. I'm just throwing that out there, Disney. Take it, take it if you will. But yeah, we got Muppets, and it's the Haunted Mansion. There's references to all the storylines and the aesthetics of the ride. The Doom Buggy has a fun little moment, and then references to all the ghosts that show up there and the lore of the Haunted Mansion. So if you love the Haunted Mansion ride and love that lore behind it, there's a lot of that in this movie. And it's only an hour long. It's a great little hour-long special. And plus, it's a little sweet story about Gonzo kind of finding himself. And Pepe is along for the ride, cracking jokes. It's fun. I had fun. Something else I had fun with on Disney Plus is the latest from the MCU in terms of series. Marvel's What If. If you're unfamiliar with it, Marvel's What If was a comic series, I want to say, that came out in the 80s. There was an 80s version and I think a 90s run. It didn't last long, but it was basically a view of what would happen if this changed. It was basically to, in reference to the DC. There's a DC comic series of a similar nature that was called Elseworlds, and the idea is like we're in the and now that they're going from cosmic to multiversal, we've got all kinds of alternate universes where the choices led to different things happening. So, what would happen if Steve Rogers wasn't able to get in the machine to make him Captain America, and instead Peggy Carter got in there and became Captain Carter. Some people refer to her as Captain Britain, but there's already a character with that name and its own backstory. No relation. So she would be Captain Carter. What would happen if Yondu didn't go pick up Peter Quill, but instead he sent some other Ravagers who accidentally picked up T'Challa instead? And turns out T'Challa is the better Star-Lord. This is canon now. Canonically, T'Challa is the better Star-Lord. Things would be better off if T'Challa was Star-Lord, not Peter Quill. But you'd have to watch the series to understand what I'm talking about. Other things. What would happen if Ultron had gotten a hold of Vision's body and technically won? What would have happened if the Avengers had never formed? Like, something had happened and it led to the Avengers never being able to form and take down Loki. What would have happened if Stephen Strange, instead of losing the use of his hands, lost the love of his life? Which is a really powerful one that I enjoyed. And what would happen if Thor was an only child? And that's just basically a party episode. It's Thor holding a rager on Earth and then getting in trouble when his mom finds out. So yeah, it's fun. It's a mix of stories like that. Plus, they threw in the Marvel Zombies as a what if, and it is a really. And that's the interesting thing is that if you could. It plays off like it's self-contained stories for the most part. And then towards the end, it starts to combine as Uatu the Watcher, played by Jeffrey Wright, the aforementioned Jeffrey Wright, is starting to realize he's not the only one watching. And something happens where the multiverse itself is at risk. And so he has to form his own superhero team from across the multiverse in order to protect the multiverse. He has sworn a vow to never interfere with the universes and with any of the timelines, lest it be thrown into abject chaos. Because if he intervenes in one, that could lead to all kinds of trouble down the line. And plus, it would he's only there to watch. He's only there to keep an eye on the universes, and he can't intervene. He can't really intervene. And what happens when there's a threat to that, and he has to intervene lest all the universes become at risk. And yeah, it's a really interesting thing. There was one episode we didn't get that shows up, that gets referenced in the finale. Apparently there was supposed to be an episode with Gamora, and I'm assuming it's what if Gamora was the only daughter of Thanos? Something like that. Or what if she had never joined the Guardians of the Galaxy? It's going to be something like that, but that got delayed due to problems surrounding COVID. And so that got moved to season 2. That'll probably be the season 2 premiere. So you can go back and rewatch the finale and know who this Gamora is that they bring in. And she's even featured here on the poster. But yeah, it's a really interesting series. Like, I think the thing that stands out the most is the aesthetic. This cel-shaded 3D animation. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I think they kind of nail it by the end. Like, it's a bit off-putting, kind of, because especially since they're trying to recreate the faces of the actual actors from the MCU. So it's a bit off-putting and kind of Uncanny Valley-ish at points, but it does kind of become... It kind of works by the end, and it kind of, makes that aesthetic work for it. Speaking of which, there is a lot of the MCU main cast here providing their voices. Haley Atwell returns as Peggy Carter. This is the final... This season is the final voice performances of Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. And he appears in several episodes. I thought it was just going to be the one episode where T'Challa is Star-Lord, but he shows up as T'Challa in several episodes. So we get some extra voice work from him, just that was recorded before he passed. You've got Benedict Cumberbatch as returning as Stephen Strange. You've got Michael Douglas returning in one episode as Hank Pym. You've got Michael B. Jordan reappearing as Killmonger. And then even lower on down the list, more of the character actors. People like Frank Grillo shows up in one episode as the character who would become Crossbones. And I think he shows up in a couple. God, why can't I remember his name? Phil Coulson. Damn it. That guy. Phil Coulson shows up. Samuel L. Jackson reprises his roles as reprises the role of Nick Fury. Tom Hiddleston plays Loki. Chris Hemsworth plays Thor. And apparently even Natalie Portman, since she's already back playing Jane Foster for the movie, it reprises her role in the Thor episode because she and Jane and Thor end up together even as he's an only child party boy. But, yeah, it's a very... Oh, and Jeremy Renner is Hawkeye. The only ones who don't return are Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, and... Brie Larson as Captain Marvel doesn't show up for some reason. I'm guessing mainly she may have been busy doing something else during those recording sessions. Who knows? And then Scarlett Johansson does not reprise the role of Black Widow. Also, Christian Slater doesn't reprise the role of Ultron, which is odd because, well, why not? What's Christian Slater doing? Is he busy? What's he busy doing? He can't come back. Brie Larson can't come back, but the voices they got for those characters matches. Weirdly enough, Lake Bell does a killer Scarlett Johansson impression. I could not imagine that Scarlett's voice coming out of Lake Bell, but damn if she didn't kill it. Yeah, it's an interesting. I love what if stories. I like the idea of, because in the comics it goes wilder places. There was a what if story of what if Aunt May became a herald of Galactus. Things like that. So, what if goes some weird places in the comics, and I think if it allows itself to be more silly, equally as silly as it is serious, it can be a fun ongoing series of like what would happen if these points in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we know spun off into their own separate universes. And so like what if the choices went differently and now things are different. And specifically in the Marvel Zombies one, it's basically an adaptation of the miniseries that was not exactly a what if story, but like an similar vein of that of here's one of the multiverses where a zombie outbreak happens. And I think that one was fine. Like, it's a zombie story. It tries to be a bit more comedic, and it doesn't, and it kind of clashes, but otherwise it's solid. So yeah, Marvel's What If. I think Disney Plus is doing well with the Marvel series. I think whoever's in charge of, if it's still Feige or whoever at Marvel Studios is handling the TV side of things, they're killing it. They're doing great. Cutting back over to Netflix, the last two are just things that I've been watching on Netflix to catch up on my year. And the first thing I watched this past week was the first thing in a while I've had to put on my least favorite list. Never heard of the book, and I'm curious to see how the book played out, but things heard and seen. Oh boy, this thingy. So the premise is basically, if you've seen What Lies Beneath, you've seen this movie. Possibly done better, more than likely done better, because even though I haven't seen What Lies Beneath, I saw a lot of people saying like, oh great, it's a worse version of What Lies Beneath. So I'm guessing that book and movie are probably better than, I don't know how bad the book is, but the premise here is Amanda Seyfried is a bulimic wife of this art professor who just got a job in upstate New York in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. And while they're up in New York, it turns out the house they got had murders in it, and there are hauntings going on. And while that's going on, it turns out that Seyfried's character is learning the truth about her husband and the fact that he's been lying about so many things. And it's trying. Man, is it trying. It is trying to be self-serious and a slow burn kind of thriller, but it just is so dull and slow. I think the problem is it's so slow of a burn that you think the light is going out. It's that slow of a burn. And I think it doesn't help that I think James Norton is miscast. The idea of the way that James Norton's character works is it's kind of like Jack Torrance from the book The Shining. Not so much the movie, but the book, where you think you're dealing with a stable human being, loving father, that's all that. And then as the story goes on, he slowly gets more erratic, more angry, more violent. And while it doesn't, I think they trying to imply that sort of thing is happening in the movie. I never got that. I just saw it as more like a spoiled kid realizing his big elaborate lies is finally unraveling. And Norton isn't intimidating. Like, he comes off as like an angry frat boy. And I don't find that intimidating. I find it kind of silly. And I think that's part of the problem. And then the rest of it is that even though it looks pretty and there are some really good camera work at points, like there's a nice fisheye lens shot, close-up shot when Seyfried has been drugged at one point during the movie, it still is so meandering and just plotting and I don't feel the tension from this movie, and I should. And I had that same problem with Stowaway as well, where we're supposed to be feeling this tension and you're not building the tension well. It's so plotting and dull and boring, and I don't feel tense. I feel tired. And by the time the big twists start happening, it then becomes silly. So now you've not only been dull this whole time and bored me to tears. By the time you get to the big twists, you're more like the Simpsons parody of The Shining than The Shining. And personally, I actually find the 1980 Shining kind of silly in retrospect. I think their points where they're trying to be scary isn't like Jack Nicholson's performance isn't as intimidating as they think it is. I think it's kind of silly. I actually kind of agree with Stephen King in that regard. I think Jack Nicholson was not the right cast, but that's just me. That's a grave to dig myself another day. And then the ending in particular is so bug nuts insane that it feels like it comes out from an entirely different movie. It is so wildly stupid that I think that's what finally drove me to be like, you know what? You're not just boring. You're stupid. And you've wasted my time. And yeah, this is... Where do they put it on the list? Not too far down the list. Oh wait, no, I just put it in the blandest, not the least favorite. Yeah, because I didn't hate it, it just bored me to tears. And I actually think I'm gonna pump it up a few notches. Just because a couple of the other things, like I put it behind Cry Macho, which also bored me to tears. But I think this has really no excuse. So, especially with all the work put into it, this has no excuse to be this boring. So yeah, things heard and seen is going to be something that's probably neither heard nor seen by the end of this year. I don't see people going back to this one anytime soon. This is such is the problem of Netflix's more is better than good approach to it. Quantity over quality is never a good business model, Netflix. You probably actually save money by investing in good things instead of just pumping your service full of garbage. Eventually that train, I think that's the thing, is that eventually that money train is finally going to crash and burn, because I don't see that kind of business model working great in the long run, but we'll see. Speaking of Netflix, though, Monster. This actually was made and released in 2018 on the festival circuit, but it struggled to get a distributor for a few years, and then eventually it did get picked up by Netflix. And it's based on a book from 1999. I think it's the same name. What was the name of that book? I'm going to get the name of the book right, because it sounds like an interesting book. Come on, internet. Book. Yeah, same name, by Walter Dean Myers. The book is told in a mixed format, where it's partially screenplay, like it's written as a screenplay, and partially written as a diary. It's a very interesting idea that doesn't exactly work well when you translate it to film. Not that this is a bad attempt or anything. I think this is a very solid film. It is co-written by Rhoda Black, who I met thanks to my favorite movie from last year, the 40-year-old version, which was the Netflix movie that came out, and which is a autobiographical story for her. And apparently she had written this before then, because this came out in 2018. Unless the 40-year-old version came out in 2016 or something and sat on a shelf until Netflix picked it up. But yeah, Rhoda Black is probably the biggest name attached to this. Yeah, you've got Anthony Mandler, who has mainly directed music videos. And I don't think this is his first feature. Let me see. Let me take a look at his IMDb. Is it? It may be his first feature. It seems like it. He's done documentaries. He's done shorts, both TV documentary shorts and then just music videos. A lot of music videos. And he's not bad. He's not a bad director by any means. And the other two writers, Cole Wiley and Janice Schaffer. Janice Schaffer? Am I saying those right? Cole and Wiley, I want to say Janice Schaffer. Or Janice. Janece. I want to say that's Janice. Because it looks like Janice. My mind is saying it's Janice. I don't want to mispronounce it as something that's not Janice. But, yeah, Colin and Wiley and Schaffer are two newcomers. This is their first screenplay credit. And, oh wow, apparently the guy who wrote the book, Walter Dean Myers, had a whole bunch of stuff. Motown and Die, Fallen Angels, Scorpions, Somewhere in the Darkness, Legend of the Lost Tomb? Huh. TV movie for Hallmark. Case 219. Anyway, the premise is something that is sadly still relevant. Even though the book was from 1999, the premise is sadly still relevant. You've got Kelvin Harrison Jr. as this teenager Steve. 17, I believe he's supposed to be 16 or 15 in the book. And he gets caught up in a robbery turned homicide, and is brought in for questioning and is charged with the murder after two of the other guys involved fingered him, and another guy involved for the murders. And so because of a plea deal, Stephen gets charged with full murder. Full on first degree murder. And first or second degree? Shit, I forget which degree of murder he's charged with, but he's being charged with murder. And it's up to his defense attorney to help him, not get convicted. And while that trial is going on, we see the backstory, Steve's backstory, where he's a film kid who loves movies and is in a film club at his school and is all into taking pictures. So he's into photography, he's into filmmaking, he wants to be a filmmaker. And as part of that, there is just a local, gangster kid, guy who's in the neighborhood, played by Rakeem Myers, a.k.a. A$AP Rocky. He plays this guy who's just, a local gangster type. And he's just in the neighborhood. They're in the neighborhood, and Steve knows him. He takes pictures of them playing basketball, hangs out with them a couple of times. And it's only after Steve gets roped in to play lookout that the lookout became for a robbery turned burglary. I think it's a burglary turned murder. And then Steve gets painted as this killer, this unstoppable monster, especially by the prosecution. He is painted as the monster, and in the book, even his defense attorney isn't sure what to think of him. And we see that he is, basically a good student. He just so happened to be, with some bad guys and, some more criminally dubious characters. And that's the thing is, we see that A$AP Rocky's character isn't bad in the sense that he's morally bad. He has some good insights on living in poverty, living in the streets, and how there's all these hustles going on that nobody talks about. And he's not a bad guy in terms of a villainous character, but he is somebody who does bad things. In the sense that over the course of a burglary, it turns into a murder. And so because he was there as a lookout because he got roped into it. Now Steve is treated as a monster, just like these other guys. And just like these other guys. And that's the thing, is like, the other guys are never seen as like heinous characters. They're just not, they're just legally dubious and morally gray. They do things for their own, for their own reasons, and don't really worry about consequences or repercussions for them or anybody else. And that's what happens when you live in that sort of environment. But that's not, the movie never really explores that part of it. But as over the course of this, Steve has to deal with the fact that everybody's trying to dehumanize, the system is trying to dehumanize him as just a thug, as just a murderer, as a monster, because they want to throw him in jail and in prison and be more free labor for somebody else. Although this is New York, so I don't know if they still did that in 1999 or if they still do it now. But I mean, he's basically there to line so that some prison owner, some prison financier can line their pockets. That's all prisoners do nowadays, sadly, if they're not being forced to do free labor. But this movie never really digs into those deeper things. It never really digs into just how broken the criminal justice system is. It tackles it. It mentions, it dances around the topic, but never sinks its teeth into the very nature of how it dehumanizes to make these, people, to make themselves seem like they're doing the right thing. And oftentimes, it never asks the question of, the reasoning behind what happens. There's so many issues with the American justice system that need to be tackled, and this movie only kind of, addresses the thing and then never goes any further with it. It just puts a sticker there saying, look at how bad this is, and then moves on to the next thing. And I'm wondering if that's just because the book never dug that deep into it. I don't know. I never read the book. The other problem is that it tries to do the screenplay motif by having Kelvin Harrison narrate the log line. So interior, exterior, day, night, all of that stuff. It has him narrate it at points, but it's never wholly there. It never happens consistently. It happens at the beginning, and then by the end, it's completely forgotten. And I feel like they didn't even necessarily need to add it. And if they wanted to, they could have easily done it as an overlay, like an image overlay, where it's like somebody's typing it out on a word processor, and it's basically like if Steve is writing out this story of his life as a film. So, I mean, there's ways they could have handled it that I think would have been better. But this is also a bunch of newcomers. This is a bunch of first-timers trying to tackle this heavy of a subject matter. So it never quite hits the nail on the head. It's not terrible, but there's way better movies that try to tackle these subjects. And it never really sinks its teeth into the underlying issues behind these topics. But I still think Monster is worth checking out, if nothing else, because it's a really solid movie with good actors. You got Jennifer Hudson and, once again, Jeffrey Wright. This is just the week of Jeffrey Wright, apparently. Jeffrey Wright plays Steve's dad. And so you've got them. You've got Nas, the rapper Lil Nas, as another one of the guys on the streets. You've got a cameo, essentially, by John David Washington as one of those guys, and Tim Blake Nelson plays Steve's teacher. It's a really, it's a well-cast movie, it's a well-acted movie, it's just not terribly deep, and I feel like they could have delved even deeper into this topic, but as just another story of the sort of nature of young black men being dehumanized by the criminal justice system, it does address those themes well. It never fully sinks its teeth into them, but it does address them, which is more than a lot of people do. So I'll give it that much. But that's all for this version of Deer and Projector Lights. I gotta wrap things up. So until next time, hope to see y'all in the library, and hope y'all have a good day. Bye.